Hello, and welcome to Elements of Toxicology. Toxicology is the study of the adverse effects of chemicals or physical agents on living organisms. Forensic toxicology is taking that study and applying it to matters of the law. So applying it to a murder or a death and determining the causality of it. Forensic toxicology can be used in a couple different categories. Post-mortem, the medical examiner or the coroner will draw different specimens from the cadaver and determine if they were under the influence or if alcohol or drugs played a part in their death. Criminally speaking is often motor vehicle accidents, and more often than times than not, drugs or alcohol play a part in the accident itself. Workplace, drug testing. Some workplaces require drug testing to start your job. Some require random drug tests throughout. It all depends on where you are working. Sports-wise, humans in the Olympics, humans, as soon as they cross the finish line, before they are awarded their medal, they are taken straight from the finish line after they do their little victory lap to a bathroom where they have to pee in a cup under observation. And then they are tested to determine if they are rightfully allowed to have the medal that they just won. Meaning, if they were using any performance-enhancing drugs, then the medal is nullified. Animal speaking, it is usually horses that they will test. In the environment, terrorism is the biggest cause that we've seen in the past 20 years. When 9/11 happened and the buildings collapsed, the World Trade Centers were built in the 1970s. And in the 1970s, asbestos was a popular insulation item. They put it in ceiling tiles, they put it in insulation, and so when the buildings collapsed, all of that asbestos was released into the air. So a lot of people in lower Manhattan had to wear masks in order to filter out that asbestos fibers so that it wouldn't affect their lungs. Toxic substances in general may be a cause of death. It can contribute to a death, meaning that it's not the actual cause of it, but the person had a heart attack and the drugs in their system led to that heart attack. So it contributed to the heart attack. It can cause impairment, and oftentimes it can explain behavior, especially behavior that is out of the norm. Historically speaking, poisons have been around for a very, very, very long time. The first noted use of poisoning was the execution of Socrates in 339 BC. He was poisoned by an extract of hemlock, which is in the picture to the left. Hemlock, if you look at these leaves right here, they have very similar leaves as carrots, and they're actually related to carrots. Carrots, not poisonous. Hemlock, very poisonous. However, if you ask a 2-year-old, carrots seem to be poisonous to them, or at least that's what they tell me. European Renaissance is where it actually blossomed. It became very, very popular in the Renaissance. A lot of the poisons came from plants, so hemlock, monkshood, belladonna, those were all plant-based. Arsenic was also another one of their favorites, but arsenic is a heavy metal, but it's all naturally occurring on Earth. Matthew Orfila published The Traits of Poisons in 1814, and he really became known as the father of toxicology. And in 1836, James Marsh developed a test to detect arsenic in body tissues and fluids post-mortemly. So after a person died, if there was no general cause of death, they thought they died of natural causes or some sort of stomach or intestinal issue. Then they would test the body using James Marsh's test, and a lot of times they would find out that the person had been poisoned by arsenic. Historically speaking, famous poisoners have primarily been female. However, that stereotype is not necessarily true. Males will poison just as much as females will poison. It's just that females were more notable because they were able to get into places that soldiers and physical assassins couldn't. They could get close to emperors by being their love interest. They could get close to children and families by being a caretaker. So they could get into locations that soldiers couldn't. The top 3 common motives for poisoning are the same for any murder or crime, and that is money, love, and revenge. I included a couple other motives of poisoning in there because they have been noted by people that have poisoned as to why they poisoned their victims. The aspects of toxicology. The primary reason poisons are poisons is it is in the dosage. A lot of items that we use every day in small doses can actually be very poisonous in large doses. Clostridium botulinum is one of those. Not everybody uses it, but it is used in medicine quite often. It was used to paralyze the muscles of the skull so that people would not have migraines. A side effect of that they noticed was the people that were getting the Botox injections for migraines no longer had wrinkles on their foreheads. As far as the aspects of toxicology go, the main aspect of it is the dosage. Things in small doses may be fine. However, if they are in larger doses, they could kill a person. Clostridium botulinum is one of those. It's known as the deadliest poison on Earth, but we use it in very minute amounts today in medicine to ease migraines and to ease and erase wrinkles. We call it Botox. But the whole idea behind it is that you paralyze the muscles, so the muscles will not create a wrinkle or the muscles will not create tension on the skull to cause migraines. The other issues affecting toxicity are listed there. Chemical, physical form of the substance, how it enters the body, so if it's inhaled, injected, or ingested. Body weight, physiological conditions of the victim, the time period of exposure, so if it was a short amount of time or a long amount of time, and whether or not other chemicals are present in the body or in the dosage itself. Infants and the elderly are more susceptible to toxins than healthy adults. That is because they are usually immunocompromised in the elderly, and infants, their immune system hasn't developed as much as adults have. Chronic exposure is when the exposure has happened for a long period of time, so months to years. Mies lines are these white transverse lines on the fingernail, and they show up during chronic exposure. And it won't just be one finger. It will be every single fingernail and every single toenail that will have those white lines. And it is the deposit of the poisons in the nail bed. Acute exposure is just that. It's a very small amount of time. Synergism is the combined effect of the substances, and they exceed the individual effects. So together they are more powerful than what they were apart. Antagonism is just the opposite. Together they are not as strong as what they were apart. In order to prove a case, you have to go through a couple things. You have to, first off, prove a crime was actually committed. You then have to determine the motive and the intent of the crime itself. You have to prove that the suspect had access to the poison and subsequently had access to the victim, that the death was an actual homicide, and that the death was caused by poison. So during the forensic autopsy, this is where you get the evidence to help prove that the crime was committed. Forensic pathologists and medical examiners and coroners, they will actually look for 3 things to help them determine if a poison was actually involved. So they look for irritated tissues along the mouth, nose, and throat. They look for characteristic odors. So if the body smells like burnt almonds, or if it smells like garlic or onion, and also the mise lines that we saw in a couple slides ago. If any of those 3 things are present during the initial observations, then they will go further to test more specimens. They will collect some specimens at the crime scene when they pick up the body. And that is because poisons can decompose over time. So if they have a busy time in the morgue and they have more than one body, they may not get to the body until a day or 2 later. So those initial concentrations that they collect at the crime scene can tell them how much the poison or the drug has decomposed in the person's body. There's no realistic calculation of dosage that can be made from a single measurement. So you can't say, oh, this person took such a huge dose of this that that's what killed them. You can see how much is in their system, and you can make judgments from that, but it's hard to say that it was a single dose that killed them or if it was multiple little doses that built up into their body. Specimen-wise, blood, urine, and hair and nails can be done and tested while you are alive. However, the vitreous humor of the eye, which is the liquid found on the inside of your eyeball, your bile, your stomach contents, pieces of your liver, pieces of your brain, and pieces of your kidney are all done post-mortem, so after the person has died. And then they will still collect the blood, the urine, and the hair and nails as well after death. Looking at all of that, it will allow them to determine the levels that are in the person's body. That is it for this slideshow. Thank you for listening, and please fill out your note packet.